All right, so we are live. Hello and welcome everyone. Wishing you all a very happy International Women's Month. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're extremely thrilled to have you all with us. I'm your host Hasti, and this is our second LinkedIn Live dedicated to Women's Month. So this year's goal is to encourage discussions about gender equity, equality, and community independent of prejudice and bias, diversified, liberal, and equal world in a society that celebrates and respects diversity. Before we get started, let's go over a few points that would be helpful for the upcoming session. So this session is recorded, so you can revisit the session anytime on YouTube channel at your ease. If you're facing any issues like difficulty loading the session, click on the event link and refresh the page. You can also go live on our YouTube handle and Twitter handle. I would encourage our viewers to share their embrace equity stories and selfies in the comments section. So this is since this month, the entire month we are celebrating International Women's Month. Our second guest is a very special one, and her name is Rebecca Aichholzer. Rebecca is a Salesforce Product Owner, co-chair PCA D&I Committee, Salesforce MVP, 8x Salesforce Certified expert, and passionate about tech. Not only that, she is a powerlifter, having represented Australia twice in international competitions. So let's welcome Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. Welcome to the LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing
Thank
today?
You. I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. So, Rebecca, I was actually thinking about how would I want to start this conversation with, and I just wanted to ask you, like, do you think there is a need to celebrate a particular day or a month, or do you think, or according to you, this is just an opportunity to celebrate women, to have open discussions around the topic that are usually brushed under the carpet and not so openly discussed?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for these conversations to actually happen. I think as we talk through today, we'll probably uncover lots of things that that people will resonate with. The conversations that need to be had, that people need to hear. I think that it's really important not to sweep issues under the carpet, to challenge issues as they arise, and also to understand your biases as well. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile thing to have these open conversations as much as possible about gender, about LGBTQIA+ issues, about accessibility. All of these things deserve a rightful spot in our common conversations that we have.
Yes, absolutely. And it also made me think for a while that, if we are not having open conversations, then how are we going to bring about any change, be it in the workplace, be it in our immediate surroundings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's super important for us to have these conversations in a professional environment, but also in a personal environment as well, because things like gender equality and gender equity, they don't just happen in a professional environment. They happen to us in personal environments every day. Stereotyping happens, bias occurs. So it is really important for us to address this on both, I think, a professional and a personal level.
Absolutely. And somehow I was not when you are kind of conducting so many sessions, you think like, why are you talking so much of this? But then I realized that our forefathers, or maybe my grandparents' generation, must have not discussed this issue to a greater level or an extent, and then people started talking about this, and maybe my parents have treated me like an equal to my brother, and there is no discrimination. And if people would have not initiated such conversations, then maybe I wouldn't have been enjoying my rights, my freedom, the way everybody around me is enjoying it. And also, I mean, we have seen, especially from the cultural background that I belong to, I'm an Asian Indian to be specific. So I'm sure you must have experienced also, but when I look at my grandparents' generation, there's still this ingrained thinking and a mentality where there are fixed roles for every gender. So a girl should do this or a boy should do this. But since people have started initiating these conversations, now my brother cooks, he cleans. I don't, I mean, I work, I do whatever I want to do. So they are not restricted roles for any gender. So I think now that I'm talking, and now that I've also come to realize it's important to initiate conversations. Change is about to happen. It's a very long journey, and but we're getting there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that a lot more, definitely with the younger generation, they don't see those sorts of stereotypes or biases towards particular careers. But I think, unfortunately, in society, there still are a lot of those biases that are prevalent. I think if you think about manual labor, like construction or manufacturing, or even I work in the real estate industry, it's definitely still much more male dominated. When you think of science and technology, the dropout rate for women from their STEM journeys in high school and university is still too high. They often can't see themselves represented in that industry, and therefore they do drop out. They aren't encouraged to continue. Leadership is another area that is obviously a concern, because in leadership it is still male dominated. Unfortunately, it's getting better. It definitely is getting better each year, and I hope that in my living lifetime that I can see really parity of leadership for men and women. But even as recent as yesterday, I was reading a Wall Street Journal article that actually blamed diversity distractions on the reason why the Silicon Valley Bank failed. So they were saying that their board was focusing too much on the fact that it had women on the board and a gay person on the board and a black person on the board, and that they were too distracted by the diversity, and therefore that's the reason that the board failed. And it just feels so wrong that even in today's day and age that it's still being called out to say that, well, maybe women shouldn't even sit on boards. So that's disappointing to see. But also, you think about caregiving, it goes the other way. Women are still considered the people that should look after the children, do the nursing, the early childhood care, social work, those types of things. So there are still those gender skews for particular industries or particular areas. And I do hope with time that those areas still change as well.
100%. I think I completely agree with what you said. The Wall Street example, I think more than anything else now, there are also companies who are using this as their strategy to, hire people from all backgrounds and diversities. But more than anything, the point here is giving everybody an equal opportunity, and also giving an opportunity that fits their needs.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think about, a gender equal world in the future really comes down to exactly what you said around people having equal rights, equal opportunities, and resources available to them to do what they want to do. So I think it is really important for us to be addressing that and working towards that.
Yes. So with that, my first question would be, what does a gender equal world mean to you? What, according to you, is a gender equal world?
Yeah, I mean, that's an awesome question. It's something that I've thought a lot about. I do think that, as I said, it's around those equal rights, equal opportunities, and resources. But I also think it's a society that's free from discrimination, free from bias, free from violence that's based on someone's gender identity or expression. A world where people are able to pursue their goals and aspirations without being limited by their gender. I think it means that, as we just spoke about, that people shouldn't be limited or restricted from entering careers or pursuing opportunities or interests that they actually want to do, and that we're able to recognize the value of the diversity that is, presented, so gender identities and expressions as well. And I definitely think that, achieving a gender equal world, it requires ongoing effort. It requires these conversations that we're having right now. It requires everybody in the room to have these conversations, so that we can address and eliminate things like gender-based discrimination, violence, and inequality in all aspects of life. And that includes, as we've spoken about, education, employment, healthcare, politics, culture, all of those areas that are, impacted by gender-based discrimination at the moment. And as I said, it really requires that active participation and engagement from us, from individuals, from organisations, and from government also, to help us promote and support, gender equality.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you actually, answered in a very wholesome way, where it's not just an individual or a company or allies or a group effort. It has to come from government. It has to come from, even I feel like, upbringing, like parents and at home,
Yep.
and the society in general. So yeah, and just having basic needs and basic opportunities. So just imagining an equal world where everybody feels like limitless. There's no limit to what an individual can do or achieve.
Yeah.
So it sounds almost heavenly and
It
magical.
does, doesn't it? It sounds like a utopia.
um, so I just, I mean, of course, I have faced a lot of discrimination, stereotyping, and bias in my surroundings, and I'm sure you must have faced that too. When initially, when I faced it, I wasn't aware about so many things, but now when I feel like there's even the slightest discrimination or bias that's happening with me or with somebody around me, I would speak up, and I would raise my voice, and I would say how it is without any filters. And be it in a professional setup or a personal front, I think it's very important to be aware. First of all, sometimes people are not, like I said, many years ago, I wasn't aware that this is happening. But as soon as I realized, and when I was aware, I started to stand up for myself. So I'm sure you must have also experienced some sort of bias or discrimination in your personal or professional life. Um, uh, how did you react to it, and how do you make sure that it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story there as well, because it's important, I think, to listen and bear witness to people who are sharing their stories as well, because lived experience is really important to understand, especially if it's something that I've not been, if it's not been directed at me. It's really important for me to understand how discrimination and biases affect other people as well. So thank you for sharing that. I would say yes. I think I've unfortunately, I think a lot of people have experienced discrimination or biases in different ways, but definitely in my professional life, I have on a number of occasions experienced discrimination. And look, I will say I'm a very proud woman in technology, but there have been times where I've been made to feel like I'm not a technical person. As it is, I come from a non-technical background, so I'm continually fighting my own biases and my own imposter syndrome, because I often don't even think that I'm worthy of wearing that woman in technology title. But I then look at all of my certifications that I've got for the technology that I work with Salesforce, and I put that proud hat on again and say, yes, you are actually a woman in technology, and own it. But it can be really daunting at times, especially if you're working on, say, a large technology project, knowing that most of the people in the room will be men. And again, I have no problem working with men, but I enjoy working with a nice diverse group of people. And so it can be difficult when you are sitting in a room and you know that you're only one woman and there's 13 men sitting in the room with you on a project. So finding your voice can be difficult, and it does take a lot of work to be heard, to be trusted, to be respected as well. And so, you know, you asked how do I react to that? It's hard, right? It's hard sometimes because you can feel like you don't have a voice. Your voice is shaky because you want to say something and you're not sure how it will be received. Or sometimes you're just not called on in that room to even have any input. So that can be difficult as well. So things that I do that are within my control is I have a thing that I call a career limiting move. I trawl LinkedIn. I am always on there, and I'm always looking at at interesting stories. And obviously, a lot of my LinkedIn feed is about technology, and I will often see photographs of groups of men in technology standing there. They've either been on a panel or they're speakers at a conference and things like that. And I call out on LinkedIn and I ask where the women are. And so I called it a career living move because I've done it to some fairly big companies around Australia and globally in the past couple of years. But each time I think, should I do this or not? I think no, because if they see this and they think about the fact that they haven't got a diverse group of people in that photograph, then maybe they'll consider changing it next time. So I always call it out. There's probably a few companies in the world that I'm blacklisted from that I don't know about, but I think it's really important to, as you say, challenge those perspectives and those things that people do, because, you know, for me, representation matters. If you can see it, you can be it. Those are two phrases that I really love talking about and saying, because if you can see yourself in a photo, you feel like you might actually fit into that place. So I think that's really important. That's probably in my professional life, but in my personal life, you know, just to flip the coin, I actually made the decision not to have children a few years ago, and it's something that people don't understand. If I'm a woman, I must want children, I must be motherly, and all those sorts of things. But I never had a desire to be a mother, and I never felt that desire. And it was really interesting because for years people called me selfish. They called me lots of other things just for making that decision. And even my parents expected me to have kids. And it wasn't until after I turned 40 that they stopped actually asking me if I was going to have kids. And from that, I guess my lesson is that I really strongly believe that everyone's entitled to choose their own path. And we shouldn't be discriminated against because of who we are, what gender we are, who we choose to love, how we choose to live, and how we interact with the world. So I think that you know, it's really important to consider all those things when you're actually interacting with people, because you just don't know what it is that, you know, what decisions they've made to get them to that point.
Wow. I mean, yeah, so firstly, I want to talk about the professional front that you said, like career limiting.
Move.
Career limiting?
Yeah. So yeah. Career limiting move. Yeah, I call it that just because I think, wow, I might not get hired by somebody by saying this, but I think it's important to be said. And I think I wouldn't want to work for that place that is having such a narrow view of what their company should look like, or what their team should look like, or who the speakers are. If I call it out and tell them, then and they do something about it, then maybe that's a place I would want to work in the future.
Yeah, and I think we should start as a movement. Hashtag career limiting move, and make it
Make it a
trending.
I love it.
Yeah, make it a thing. So I think that's an amazing thing to call out. I mean, if we have a voice, and a voice so strong as you are, I think why not? Why not call it out? And yeah, and if we are given a platform like LinkedIn, where our voices are heard, and it's a wonderful community. If you share your story, I think there is so many people around who have similar stories, across genders, across cultures. So yeah, it's very relevant. It's very connecting, and that's a brave move. And I think everybody should take notes from this. And coming to the personal front, I mean, I this is something even really personal with me, because I have so many friends who are getting married and having kids, and I'm 28, so I'm single, and I don't wish to get married anytime soon, and yeah, even apprehensive about having kids. So I feel that I can't even share this openly with people around me, only because I would face judgment. There will be a lot of judgment, like, as to you. I mean, if you are a woman, you are supposed to marry by a certain age, and you are supposed to have kids. That's how life works, and that's cycle of life. But I mean, we have choice to live the life the way we want to live, and there's not a template that everybody comes or everybody is born with, right? I mean, not a fixed template. So I completely resonate with what you're trying to say. And when people have such conversations, I really want to say things like, but there are so many options. Like, people talk about the biological clock ticking, but I say that there's so many options. Like, you can always go for an adoption. Even if you're 5 or 6 or you feel like having a child, you can adopt a child. There's a lot of advancement in medical science today. You can freeze your eggs at an early age. You can always go for multiple options. There's surrogacy, and there's so many options. So why limit yourself?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I think my mum was hoping that I might freeze some eggs or do something like that, but I made a decision because for me, not to say that career was my driver, but my career is important to me. But also, I think when I say to people, I love world travel. I love traveling. I have been to 40 countries. It's something's a real passion of mine. That's when people say, oh, well, you're selfish that you've chosen to do your career and travel over having children. But for me, it was just not an option for me. It wasn't something that I was interested in doing. And I kind of say to people, well, I think those passions wouldn't have been, those lights wouldn't have been extinguished in me if I'd had a child. And so that may have meant that I brought up a child in a bad environment, because I still wanted to travel and I still wanted to have my career. So in fact, I think that I made the right choice for me. But everyone is different, and everyone, as I said, should have that right to choose what it is, be the master of their own destiny, or the mistress of their own destiny. And that's the way it should be, without that external pressure to that everyone feels, as you say, and I felt as well. Oh, right, I'm supposed to have a child. I'm a woman. I'm supposed to take time off work, and I'm supposed to set myself back in my career, and then not when I retire, my superannuation, as we call it in Australia, wouldn't be as much as a man's because I had all that time off work having a child, and there's a lot of financial implications that come along with having a child that sets women back financially for their entire lives as well. So not saying those were my decision points, but they having a child can impact all of those things as well. So it's definitely something to consider.
Absolutely. And it's just one lifetime, and we have the right to live the way we want. And I feel like people shouldn't even be asking or questioning such things like, hey, do you have, you're married since a long time, so you must be having 2 kids. I mean, that's not a question to ask, right?
No.
Until the person is telling you. And this is something that I'm glad that we had this conversation. So there are many people who would be listening to us, might be resonating to this conversation just like I did.
Good.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing. This is not something that everybody usually shares, but thank you so much.
That's okay.
So I would want to ask, what are some of the actions you take to make sure that equity and equality both prevail around you?
Yeah. I definitely strive for being inclusive in everything that I do, but obviously no one's perfect. We all have blind spots and unconscious biases. So it is something that I do think about a lot. Some of the things that I do, I think you mentioned it at the start when you introduced me. I'm the co-chair of the Queensland Property Council Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee. I co-founded my work's Q Pride Committee, which is our LGBTQIA+ network. I'm also a member of our Diversity, Inclusion and Wellness Committee at my organisation. And I'm working, a working group to kickstart our newest employee resource group, which is focused on accessibility for our employees and customers. So I really am quite action-oriented when it comes to being all in on diversity and inclusion. It's just such an important thing for me when I look at everything that I've been doing in my life and where it's, and how it's got me to here. It really is something that is important. And when I think about things that people can do to make sure that, as you say, equity and equality sort of prevail around them, I think that there's a few things that pop into my mind. The first thing really is educating yourself, particularly about the different forms of inequality and discrimination that exist in our society, and trying to learn how to recognise them. I'm an avid consumer of information about inequality. I read books, I watch documentaries, I engage in discussions with people from different backgrounds so that, as I said to you at the start, I can try and gain a better understanding of their lived experiences. I attend training sessions on things like understanding unconscious bias, being an inclusive leader, and creating inclusive teams. So those are all things that I've been able to attend mostly through my work. They've put those events on, so I've been able to do those. I've learned about mental health awareness and how to create psychological safety. And I'm always taking a learning approach to things. You aren't meant to know everything. I think it's really important not to be afraid to ask questions, because it's only by asking questions that you find out the right things to say or how to approach something. And probably as an example of that, I've got a number of transgender friends. And so whenever I have a question, they're always more than happy for me to ask them the question, as much as it might be awkward I don't know how to structure the question that I'm asking them, but they are willing to work with me and give me a response because they really know that I'm interested in being an ally to them. And so it's only at those times that they're able to educate me that I can understand and help to be a better ally for them in rooms where they're not. So for me, that's really important, and I think that's something that everybody can do, is not be afraid to ask questions. I also think it's important, as you said, Hasti, is to stand up or speak up if you see any form of discrimination or inequality. But do so if you can. If you're in an uncomfortable space, it's important to make sure that you protect yourself too. But if you can stand up, speak up for what is right. That's really important. It means when you stand up for something, and I think people say, well, how do you do that? Because as I've said to you already, I've developed a bravery to be able to do this, but how do you start on that path? Because, it can be hard to challenge offensive comments, behavior, attitudes, or those types of things when you see it. But in 2018, I went to the Dreamforce, the Salesforce Equality keynote, and there was an actress there, Tracy Ellis Ross, and she was being interviewed, and something that she said really resonated with me and helped me to find my voice. She spoke about when she first started seeing injustices, and she wanted to challenge the behaviors of people. But when she addressed the situation, she said her voice shook, and you might know what I mean. When you say something and you in your belly, you're not quite confident to say it, your voice gets shaky, and you go, oh gosh, my voice is shaky. I shouldn't be saying this because I don't have the right words to say. But she said it anyway. And then she said, each time she started to see discrimination or biases, she stood up again and she spoke again, and her words came more easily, and she was able to speak more confidently and speak with conviction. And what she said, and this is what resonated with me, and she said, speak even if your voice shakes, because there's a time where your voice won't shake. And that's the thing that I think is most important. You're calling out the behavior, and even if you've got a shaky voice, someone's going to hear you and go, you're right, that's not right. That person shouldn't say that. But if you say nothing, then you let that behavior occur again. So for me, that's the really important thing, is to, speak even if your voice shakes. I was going to say, there's lots of other things I could say. I think one of the other things that, as I said to you, is listening to people who have lived experience of discrimination or inequality, and practice empathy with them. Listen to their stories, learn from their experiences, and validate their feelings as well, because it's so important to understand people's lived experiences. It's not possible for you to have gone through and understand the depths of discrimination that others have been a party to. And finally, be an ally. So being an ally, you can say you're an ally, but I think it's important to say that you're an active ally. And active allies are someone who take action to support and advocate for marginalized individuals or communities. Being an active ally is more than just passively supporting a cause or expressing solidarity. It means actively engaging in actions that will challenge those systemic inequalities that are persisting in our society. And it's someone who listens to and validates those experiences of marginalized individuals, someone who educates themselves about systemic barriers that prevent equality, someone that will take action to address and dismantle the barriers, use their privilege as a platform to advocate for marginalized communities. That's something that I try and do every single day. I show up, I'm visible, I take actions to support the communities. I reflect on my own biases and privilege as well, and I try to address them. And that a lot of that education and the reading and the going to training courses really helps you to reflect on your biases and try and find those blind spots that you have, because everybody has them. And just recognize that being an active ally is a lifelong commitment to continuously work to improve being an ally. And for me, that's the most important thing. It's not tokenistic. It's something that you are actively working on every day.
Wonderful.
Did that
I
answer your question?
mean, it's such a good insight. Sorry.
Did that answer your question? I felt like that was very long-winded, but hopefully that answered your question.
No, I mean, you just give like a step-by-step guide as to how can we, so how can we question things around us, and
Mhm.
especially question us before questioning people around us. So I think education and self-awareness is very important.
Yeah.
And like you said, you are an avid reader, and you consume a lot of content like documentaries. You are a part of many groups.
Yes.
So could you please, you know, take us through a few books or the topics or documentaries that have helped you uh, to kind of understand this better?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think I read books on all different parts of diversity and inclusion, and but also inequality as well. I think one of my passions is probably the wrong word, but my really peak interest is man's inhumanity to man. And so I read a lot about inequality. So I've done lots of readings from Nelson Mandela. I've done readings about the Holocaust. I've read about a lot about women in leadership and the difficult journeys that they have. I probably don't have anything that off the top of my head I can think of specifically, but I will always, seek out YouTube videos. I'll watch LinkedIn videos that people post. I think LinkedIn Learning is actually an amazing place to find a lot of information. So if you can access LinkedIn Learning, that's a really great repository. The searchability of that is amazing, and you can actually find so many different things that you learn about unconscious biases, inclusive leadership, and all of those types of things. Because I've watched a lot of those videos, they've got curated trails that you can actually watch video after video of all of the different aspects of discrimination and bias, and how you can challenge them. So I think if that's a really great place to start.
I think the reason why I wanted to get these pointers from you, because, like you said, there's a lot of chatter. Everybody is talking about this, but unless and until we don't become an active ally, or
Mm-hmm.
learn about these things, we would just keep on having a chat and just no action.
I,
So
I
I
think
think,
I
yeah.
I was going to say, I think one place you can go. So obviously, I'm in Australia, so there's a lot of industry organisations that you can actually go to their websites and find out about in Australia. There's some, but all over the world there are industry bodies or peak organisations or peak groups that you can go and have a look at in your particular country. So in Australia, we've got ACON, which is an amazing place to go and read about. They've got fact sheets on LGBTQIA plus issues that you can go and read about. They've got videos from people that you can learn from their lived experiences. There's the Australian Network on Disabilities that also has heaps of fact sheets that you can learn about accessibility. But then there's heaps of there's a plethora of places you can find stuff about being a woman in leadership, or being a woman in technology. Those are things that I really focus in on and try and understand a lot more, because I think those are some really important underrepresented places that we need to address.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you so much, because I think even as we are speaking, even I'm thinking about reading more and more, because I watch YouTube videos, and I am active on Instagram conversations, and I follow many activists, many allies who are in support of LGBTQI, in support of women equity, empowerment and everything. But I feel like the depth that you get reading, and by uh, going going into a greater detail, about certain topics that interests you and that you feel passionate about makes a lot of difference, and that would kind of, like you said, active action and being an active ally rather than being a tokenist is something that all of us need. So thank you so much for sharing this.
That's okay. I just think once you open your eyes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's hard to exclude any part of it. So, I first opened my eyes, as I said, I was a co-founder of my organization's Q Pride committee because I have a brother-in-law who is gay. I have other friends who are in the community as well. And I was like, well, this is something that's really important to me because I know people that are impacted by discrimination that is against them. But then once I started doing that, I'm like, wait a sec. Well, then there's women in technology and there's women in leadership, and then all the gender issues that come along with that. And then I thought, well, it's not just that. I now know people that are in other communities as well, accessibility or people with disabilities, both invisible and visible. And I was like, there's just so many marginalized individuals or marginalized communities that once you open your eyes with empathy to look at all of these, it's really, it just becomes part of you that when you see an injustice, you call it out, whatever form that takes, whoever that's impacting, because I don't just choose to say, well, women or gender is my only diversity focus. My focus is justice and fairness for all. Oh. Hello? You might have lost Hasty. Hopefully Hasty will be back in a minute. Thank you so much to everyone for coming along and watching. Thanks, everyone.